In Japan, generally speaking, Japanese people are very well trained to be sensitive to the opinions of others. There's a kind of translated term, the eyes of society. And people tend to work to conform and not stand out, not be conspicuous. And with that as kind of broad cultural background, it's very difficult to come out in Japan. There is a relatively limited number of people who come out. That's one issue. I do a survey of my own students, my local students, Japanese students. How many of you personally know a lesbian or a gay man or a transgender person? And it's always a minority who can say, I do. Say maybe 20% has ever met someone, even though we know that there's lesbians in their high school class and there's gay men in their sports clubs. And so that's one situation. There's relatively little violence of any kind of physical violence that we see certainly in the US and other places, the bashing kind. There's bullying. About 40% of LGBTQ identified folks report that they've been harassed or made fun of, but it doesn't usually manifest in a kind of physical way. This is also the case for trans folk. This is a relatively safe place to be a trans person. There was recently a court decision that declared that the refusal to grant people of same sex to grant the marriage is against the Constitution. But that ruling needs to work its way through a few more steps before marriage equality is finally realized. One more thing I will add is in terms of transgender transitioning, there is still the requirement for sterilizing surgery to be able to change one's legal gender marker in Japan. I'll leave it there for the moment. Thanks.
Okay, I guess I will go next. Okay, so in Vietnam, Vietnam is kind of neutral to the LGBTQ rights. So as a part of our culture, we are taught in really young age to show our love and support to our people, especially for those who are more disadvantaged than us. So that's why in 2012, the LGBTIQ has used that message, used that tactics to advocate for the same-sex marriage law, and it's kind of effective because it shifts the discussion about LGBT rights in the society. Like it's become more visible, and people talk about the queer rights more, as well as their celebrity and influencer who publicly show the support. But I couldn't say that. I cannot say that the LGBTQ people feel safe here either, because like in the urban area, the discrimination becomes like harder to see, like harder to recognize, and and people don't say in your face that like I discriminate you because you are LGBTQ. They just like, well, I'm not homophobic, but I think you are sensitive sometimes, something like that. The discrimination becomes like harder to see. But meanwhile, in the rural area, the discrimination is like more recognizable. Like the queer people with the queer gender expression, they can get called by the slur, they can face the violence, they can have restriction to access to the healthcare and education and job market, etc. And in terms of the law right now, Vietnam marriage law, they don't allow the same-sex marriage yet, but after like some controversial discussion in 2012, they don't ban people to get wedding ceremony, the same-sex wedding ceremony anymore, and we make it like a milestone in the LGBTQ movement. And in 2015, when the Congress passed the law, the transgender law, which allowed transgender people to change their gender on the identification or on the other paperwork, they also allow trans people to have medical transition legally. And the thing is, the law was supposed to be out in 2019, but it's 2021 and it's still on the draft and it's not available yet. And not to mention that in the law, the intersex people may face the risk of being normalizing genital surgery that often performed without consent and during infancy, leading to the lifelong suffering to the intersex people. It's kind of generally what happened in Vietnam right now, in the legal term.
All right, thank you, Mark. And I think we've got Craig that is left.
Right, thank you. So in the lawyer and me will come out naturally. Then in New Zealand, it was illegal to be, homosexuality was illegal until 1986. And then the homosexual law reform came through, decriminalized it, and in, I want to say 2013, same-sex marriage became law in New Zealand. So in typical New Zealand style, a song was sung in Parliament when the law was passed. So that kind of gives you a sense of the New Zealand culture around that. But I would also say that while Kiwis have a very sort of strong social sense of right and wrong, and the way that people should all be treated fairly and equally, the experience of growing up as a young gay person in the 80s and 90s, certainly in my environment, was extremely toxic. So there were very clear ideas of masculinity and being a male, and femininity and being a female, and if you crossed that, then you got bullied. So I crossed that and I got bullied. So in Switzerland, we have civil union. So Switzerland was the first country to approve civil union by referendum. So for those of you who are familiar with the Swiss political system, any law can be taken to a public vote. So from the sort of the most mundane laws to the most significant laws, and 2004, 2006, many years ago now, civil union was approved in Switzerland. At the end of last year, this was Parliament approved same-sex marriage, and a coalition of very right-wing parties led by a very right-wing Christian party collected the 50,000 signatures to take that vote to the law, and in September 23rd of September, 26th of September, I should know the date, we will have a vote on same-sex marriage in Switzerland. So very exciting, and the culmination of years of activity to get it to this point. The Swiss don't move quickly when it comes to legislation, and particularly contentious legislation. The country is a lot about harmony and consensus. Personally, the Kiwi in me struggles with that. I don't think women should have half a vote. I think women are entitled to a vote. You don't compromise on human rights. That's been a journey in patience for me with my cultural background, but I'm also convinced that the Swiss will make the right decision, and come the end of September, my husband and I will be able to marry for the third time.
Be a bigamist.
Well, good luck with that. Hopefully it's going to happen. And since we're progressing, you guys have very interesting stuff to say. I think it's best if we just move forward with a couple of questions so we can try to cover as wide of a spectrum as possible. And my idea would be that next we try to talk about what consequences a person has to face when they are coming out, especially if it's in their workplace, or, I mean, you already mentioned it a little bit at school, that if you didn't fit the norm, that you were bullied, or any kind of institution for that matter. Is there some kind of blowback that, I don't know, is an incentive to not live to the identity that you have, but instead to hide it?
Should I answer? Is that Tom? Is that question at me, or is it?
It's a general question, but I mean, you can definitely feel free to answer that one and start.
So it's obviously very country specific and very company specific. In my career, I've always worked for large companies, or for the government, and the belief, and I think the data supports it, is that the success of large companies is around diversity. So there's more resources to tackle workplace issues, and because large companies have to manage workplace issues through a kind of a broad brush approach, so through codes of conduct, for example, the result of that mechanism for managing staff in a company of 5,000 or 50,000 people is that the standard by which those staff are treated is pretty much the same, and usually quite what I would think of as quite liberal. So part of the experience of coming out is dependent on the culture that's set in a company. I've always been out pretty much since my first day of work. I've never suffered discrimination in the work. I've never suffered direct or obvious discrimination in the workplace, not ever, that I could say. But I think white gay men, white professional gay men, are quite extremely privileged. So my performance and the privilege that I bring to the table allows me to, and obviously my education and everything else allows me to succeed. I would say there's a recognition from those big companies of the need to have diversity. I think they're struggling with inclusion. I think they're really struggling with inclusion, but I think that sort of intellectually they understand that diversity is important, and that countries and companies that have diverse workforces tend to be extremely successful. And vice versa, companies and countries that don't tend to be diverse don't. But I'm not saying that cause and going back to my statistics, that cause and an effect of the, however you say it, that one leads to the other. So I guess I would finally say that for being an LGBTI person, the importance of being able to be out, if you can be out in the workplace, and your ability to contribute to the workplace, and the effect it has on your mental health, means that if you can come out, you should. If you're in a safe environment and you can have that Monday morning conversation about your partner, whichever gender your partner happens to be, and not be trying to find gender neutral language or avoiding the conversations or avoiding the coffee or whatever it might be, the ability for you to come out and also show your colleagues that you respect them and trust them to treat you with respect, I would say it's extremely important. But that's very obviously dependent on location and company and country.
All right. Thank you so much, Greg. So, Jeffrey, how about Japan? Or, I mean, you also have the perspective of the United States. What is the perspective like there?
Well, in my organization, as far as I can tell, there's nobody who has come out as LGBTQ. We are an organization that is devoted to internationalization. That's part of our sort of branding. But there's virtually no recognition of the existence of gender and diversity around sexual orientation where I am. So Japanese law and legal precedent around dismissal pretty much favors an employee who has been in a position, in a regular position. So if you were in a position like that, the chances of being fired for coming out are very small. Though you could have your career interrupted or diverted or not given sustenance if someone decided that they didn't like you for a reason like that. But Japan has a lot of employees who are so-called irregular workers, part-time or contract or dispatch workers. And that's a growing segment of the labor force. And anyone in that position could be risking their employment if they were to be open about their background, about their sexual orientation or gender identity.
All right. Thank you so much for that perspective. Mark, what about your experience in Vietnam? How's it like over there?
Yeah. So overall, I think that like the cis gay male in Vietnam, they have more visibility now. So and they are more likely to to be accepted in the workplace and more likely to be successful in their career. Because they are also affected by the stereotype like gay people are good at creative and art, and so in that industry, gay people can be really popular and really successful. But in other industry, for like for example, we just had the election in Vietnam, and there was a gay male who run for the congressman, and he faced a lot of discrimination and like the lots of harassment on the online space. So it's kind of restricted in some industry right now. And trans women also have more visibility nowadays, like in the recent years. But and that's why they have more access to more career opportunity. But you see, after years, like lifelong barriers, get access, like after like lifelong discrimination and like not able to access to a higher education and get a better healthcare, the trans community also suffer from like being recognized at work and be able to choose variety career path, because they are also facing the stigma that they can, especially for the trans women, they are seen as like they do work in the beauty industry or like the modeling in the entertainment industry, and they don't have much career opportunity. And not to mention that like the other community, like the lesbian, the bisexual, and the gender diversity community, like non-binary or genderqueer or agender, the society don't know about them yet. So even if you come out, the people don't know how to react because they don't know what it is. So they don't know who you are. And it can be, the discrimination in the workplace can be differ from the area to area. Like I mentioned before, in the urban area, the discrimination might be harder to see, but in the rural area, it can be like a much more worse. Yeah, I think it's kind of like the consequence when coming out in the workplace.
All right. Thank you so much for that perspective. And lastly, Mo, I mean, you already mentioned that the police raided your office earlier this year. So I have to assume in Ghana, it's very much of a difficult topic and very much something that you try to avoid to have publicly out there, just to avoid trouble with the authorities or more right-wing, well, let's call them forces. Or is my perception off on that one?
Absolutely. In Ghana, we do not have the privilege. Nobody in Ghana currently has the privilege to come out. Well, we have elitists who in families that are more accepting and all of that. So that is how you can do. You can just come out with the closed cycle that you find yourself in. If they are accepting and they are also tolerant, that's fine. But then you can't publicly state that this is who you are. The few of us who have done this have coined some kind of strength for ourselves to say that now we are at that tipping point. Like, we do not care anymore. You have to accept us. We are here. We are part of history. We are part of the culture, and we are queer. So you have to accept us. And we are seen as rebels, and we are seen as we are seen as very confrontational when it comes to politics. So coming out is not something that we are at a point in Ghana here that we enjoy to do. It's more like when you come out, it's like you've signed your CU.
That seems like a technical problem there. Mo is frozen on my
Maybe
end.
he's back in a second. Yeah, he's
Yes,
back.
he's back.
Perfect.
Oh,
Mo,
sorry.
and you were frozen for a split second.
Oh, really sorry about that. So, yeah, so I was mentioning that queer Ghanaians do not have the privilege of coming out publicly. You can come out in the little cycles that you find yourself, the small cycles that you find yourself. Of course, because of how the country is, we try to find community, we try to organize within ourselves, and of course, it's very easier to quote unquote come out because you are among your peers, you're among the community members. And some families too are very accepting, and some too are not so much. Should I say majority? This is also enforced by religious beliefs and culture and all of that. So we do not have the privilege of coming out.
All right, thank you so much for your insights on that topic too. And maybe we'll move on to our next cluster and next question. And our next cluster is intersections and global influences. And the question would be, how do the intersections of gender, sexuality, and race manifest in the discourse? And I know that there've been lots of discussions with all of our panelists when we were creating the questions. And I know that Mo had a lot to say about that. And maybe we can start with you here, so you can share with us on the topic.
So this is an area that I'm very passionate about, intersectionality, that is. In Ghana, I'm just going to speak in the context of Ghanaians. In Ghana, we haven't reached the point where people realize that you are one person, but with so many different identities. A human being, outside of everything, due to the system that we've created, we find ourselves being one particular thing at a time. I think one time I was on a different panel, and I was telling them that queer people are not the minority. We just have been minoritized, because at a point I find myself as a man. That is just it. I'm a man, and in that instance, my gender affords me more privileges than a woman. And at a point, I find myself as a gay man. And at that point, personally, I believe that I still do have more privileges than a woman. In the Ghanaian context, that is, I'm coming to, maybe I'll just elaborate a little. In Ghana here, we are very patriarchal. Men have the privilege of marrying women and all of that, but the women do not have that. Customarily, we are allowed to, men are allowed to be polygamous, but women are not. So when you look at this, it has been an escape for a lot of queer men to just be safe. I have been against that. But then I cannot also rule out the fact that people are just trying to look out for themselves and be safe. But in this case too, we end up using women as a shield, which is not fair, because heterosexual women, whether heterosexual or gay or transgender, all of that are not dispensable. They are human beings. we have instances in the country where we have we've heard stories of married men being caught by their wives, you know, having gay sex and all of that, catching them with their gay boyfriends and all of that. And it's happening. It's something that is happening. And as I mentioned earlier, I've been against it. But this is all part of the intersectionality that comes in. Just yesterday, a lesbian woman was raped 2 days in a row. She was dragged and raped 2 days in a row, and she was released just yesterday. And for some reason, people are justifying this rape. Sorry about the background noise. I'm really close. My window is close to the road. So as I was saying, this lesbian woman was raped 2 days in a row. She was drag and raped. And for some reason, Ghanaian men think it's okay that she was raped because she was lesbian, right? And that is like a justifiable excuse for them, just because she's lesbian, forgetting that outside of the fact that she's lesbian, she's a woman, and also equally she's Ghanaian, right? But these are men who are justifying this in all attempts of correcting her sexuality. So in this discourse, there are so many identities that you can take away from a person, because at a point, one person can be in the minority, and at a point, the same person can be in the majority. So when we are talking about intersectionality, we are supposed to bring in every other identity, sexual, race, gender, everything that makes up that person, culture-wise, where they come from, countries, and all of that. So yes, it is very important that we acknowledge that in every context of our discussion. That is the only way we can have a fair and balanced and nuanced discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Moore. That was very interesting and insightful. And maybe we can ask Jeffrey on his opinion on the question from the perspective of professor who's teaching and who is researching. That would also be something interesting to hear about.
Okay. A couple of things in the Japanese context I can mention. First of all, about intersections of race and sexuality and gender. There needs to be more research in Japan. It's a relatively homogeneous country, but there are minorities from Okinawans to the outcast group to indigenous Ainu folk, or resident Koreans or foreigners, newcomer foreigners, the fastest growing group of which is Vietnamese, in fact, coming in through the internship program. But there really hasn't been specific research that looks at how ethnic or racial positioning intersects with issues of sexuality so far. One thing we can say about the intersection of gender and sexuality, a couple of things. One, there's a tendency in Japan to not to elide or merge ideas of gender and sexual orientation. The kind of the 19th century invert model of sexuality, where if someone who loves men must have a woman inside of them, or someone who likes women must have a man inside of them. So gay men are kind of always already feminized in stereotype, and they're most visible as feminine presenting. And there's not a clear distinction between gay and transgender, because both of them are seen to be feminized. And the reverse is also true, but trans women and feminized men are much more visible in Japan than lesbians. Lesbians are the least visible in the whole spectrum in Japanese sort of public culture. Now, in some places, that kind of merging, Indonesia with waria or tomboys or something like that, where neither the individuals themselves nor the society at large make those distinctions, then that's just kind of the way the culture works. But in the Japanese case, I think what it is the people themselves, LGBT folks, are making distinctions, but the public at large doesn't understand those distinctions, and they're misrecognizing people on the basis of those misunderstandings. So right now, Japan is in the midst of what's been termed an LGBT boom, which includes a lot of kind of education through the mass media and through public television about what constitutes the boundaries of what is a lesbian, what is a gay man, what's the difference between a trans person and a drag queen, for instance. That kind of education is underway as we speak, and I think I take part in some of it myself. One more thing to mention regarding intersectionality that Mohammed brought up is for the situation of lesbians in the workplace. The Japanese workplace, like many places, the labor market is essentially based on heteronormative principles, with the idea that men are the primary breadwinners and women who may be in the workplace for a period of their lives, but they will eventually leave and take up a more important role as mothers and wives. And the workplace has been shaped to accommodate that idea of the domestic division of labor. So women aren't paid as much. They aren't seriously evaluated as much. They aren't promoted as much. There's an assumption that investment in women in training, in many cases, won't pay off in the end. And we can see that most bluntly in the situation 3 or 4 years ago, in which it was found that medical schools were quite deliberately and with full knowledge rigging the entrance scores of the women candidates. So women would have to score higher than the lowest male score in order to be admitted to the medical school. They were rigging the gender admittance ratios, and they got caught. But I couldn't think of anything more obvious and explicit than a meritocratic grading system that the people in the medical schools were putting their thumbs on the scale, essentially. So that's what I can say at this point about intersectionality.
All right, thank you so much. I think these are some very great insights that you don't usually find in the literature or in some other sources that you can access, and that is something that makes it valuable, that makes it very valuable. Thank you for that. And maybe we could also ask Mark about the Vietnamese perspective on the question, because I would assume that that would also be quite interesting.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, the conversation of intersectionality in Vietnam movement is just like just boom in around 5 years recently, and and for in my experience, I think the intersectionality is like a changing factor in the movement, because before that conversation was brought in, before that the community just talk about like equal love and everyone is equal to each other, and we all deserve the equal rights, something like that. And the society respond, yeah, just like, yeah, okay, we get it, but it's not the biggest issue that we need to deal with it right now. So the LGBT rights movement is just like stuck in a period of time. And actually the intersectionality conversation is just brought in the activist community, but it's like powerful moment for us to understand that, like for example, as myself, when I first participate in the LGBT activism, I also learned about the gender stereotype that women have to face every day. Like the stereotype just become more clearer, and it's like so more obvious, and I just can't believe that I ignore it all the time. You see, because of my privilege. But anyway, it's like a powerful moment that I realized that the LGBTQ movement and the feminism movement is also affected by the patriarchy and the misogyny. So so we need to work with each other, and when we work with each other, the power become more powerful, and we can actually make the society hear our voice. So the intersectionality conversation in our activism is also based on the diverse of gender, the sexuality.
Oh, you're back. You were
Okay.
gone for a second there, but you're back.
Oh yeah. Where did I leave?
Like, it was just a second. No worries. It was just
okay.
1 second or 2.
Okay. So yeah, I think that and like we need to include more marginalized community in the activism, in the LGBT activism with us, to create a really powerful strength to make our voice become visible and be heard in the society. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Mark, so much.
Yeah, so I just wanted to mention one more thing, one brief more thing. I also like to mention that we are constantly. I understand that it's not easy with the work, and it's a huge community, but then sometimes we fail to center our advocacy and activism against the most marginalized of the marginalized, even in the community. So most of the times when we are having conversations, you can see that we're talking about this and that, and then we forget that there are disabled people. So in this intersectionality, we have someone who is disabled, he is gay, he is Black, You understand? So it's levels and it keeps going down and down and down. And at each stage, something is taken away from the person. So we are also supposed to, when it comes to intersectionality, it's so broad that we are supposed to center everything. Everything. We are not supposed to leave anybody else, everybody. And we are supposed to break so many stereotypes and norms, you know, especially when it comes to patriarchy and misogyny. The idea that feminine men are weak because they are feminine presenting, that means that it translates to the fact that women are seen as weak beings, which is not right. Get it? So yeah, thank you. And also I may join with my phone because my laptop is low. So yeah, there's that.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much for your contribution again. And yeah, no problem when you join with your phone. Just send me a message when you're having trouble to get back into the chat. And if we move on to the next question, it would be, what are the ripple effects on the global queer politics on the developing nations? And actually, Mo, we had a really interesting conversation with you about that one. And you sort of described to us that, well, this entire notion of queerness can be seen as this corrupting Western import in Ghana. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit on that for everybody else that didn't have the pleasure to already talk to you?
Yeah, yes. Globally, there is it's not intentional, right? It's an unintentional thing that is happening because now we've globalized the struggle of LGBTQIA people when it comes to queer politics, that is. But forgetting that we have individual struggles from where we come from. So what we witness is that most advanced countries, the influence of most advanced countries over underdeveloped countries is so huge that everything that seeps down is seen as negative. In the context of Ghana, we can see, and this is no fault, of course, of anybody, that we can see that every queer culture that is experienced by the Ghanaian populace is Western. The movies and because locally, queer Ghanaians are not highlighted in any way. So immediately you say you are gay, you're like, why are you trying to be like the white people? Why are you trying to be like, you know, a Western person? Forgetting that sexuality doesn't actually have a race, right? And it doesn't have a geographical location. It's innate. It's part of humans. So this whole idea of, you know, we are all together and we are moving, even when it comes to the celebration of Pride, right? In advanced countries, they celebrate it different. There's this huge march and music and freedom and everything. And at that point, it's totally okay for you to celebrate a milestone. But then the effect of that on the undeveloped country is that, look at what you're doing there. This is not us. This is not our culture. So why would you want us to do this? Why would you want us to emulate that, right? And then also in Africa, we have this whole, we have the tendency of liking Western stuff, Western things. So most of our things have been Westernized. So it's like we try to pick and choose what works for us. So when you check Africans, oh, when it comes to fashion, yeah, of course. Our formal sectors, we are wearing the same suit as those in Europe, in America and everything. In our legal system, lawyers are still wearing robes and wigs, just like in the UK. And it's weird to see that, but then these are all remnants of colonization. And there's so many things that we need to unpack, right? And also there is so many things that needs to be acknowledged. So if when you go back into the history of Africa, you know, Africa is not a country, it's a continent, but most of the history from these individual countries has evidence of queerness. But unfortunately, the effect of colonization is that they brought in the anti-queer laws. And that is what we are fighting against currently. And then at some point, people fail to, foreigners fail to acknowledge the impact that this colonization from their countries had on these underdeveloped countries. So we are here, and then people are picking and choosing what they feel is good for advancing our culture here, and also keeping everything that is infringing on human lives, because in a sense it's not part of our culture. So anytime there is a globalization, there's a global politics on queer people, we need to check, because we are not just moving forward, we are supposed to hold the hands of people behind us to move with us, right? Because some people are at 10 and then some people are not even at 0. You understand? So you can see from our submissions from a country context that my problems are so different. Like there's no positive to being queer in Ghana. Nothing, nada. But in other countries, there is more, and there are people with, further and far more rights. And that is the kind of effect that we have. A last example I want to give is, especially when our president was going to talk on the raid in February, the only thing he could mention was that gay marriage is never going to happen under my tenure. He is right. That is true. Because we are very, very far away from marriage equality. We are nowhere near that. Because our basic human rights,
I think his phone his laptop just died. It's a little unfortunate. It was really interesting what he was talking about, but I guess he'll just join in on his phone. Ada, we were planning to take a 10-minute break to let him join on his phone. Should we maybe push the break now, or should we proceed for a couple of more talking points?
Let's push a break now. So let's maybe have a 20 minutes break. Just so that it's already been 1.5 hours. So just that the whole information settles in our heads, just because it's quite a hard topic to comprehend too. And yeah, let's just do that and be back here at 8:30 German time.
So 10-minute break, not 20.
10
right,
minutes
but,
break, yes.
All right, I'll see you guys I'll see everybody at 10 minutes then.
If there's anyone that has any questions for me, I'm happy to stay on and discuss.
Actually, Craig, I would have loved to ask you next on this question, just because you mentioned, well, I'll just turn the camera back on, it's more personal. You mentioned, exactly, it's always so cold when you're just talking to the little picture. Yeah, you already mentioned in the conversation that we had with you that there's an interesting kind of conflict of interest going on with the natives of New Zealand, the Maori, I hope I'm pronouncing that anywhere close to correctly, and let's just call them the immigrants from Europe, that there is this power hierarchy where once you enter tribal land, there's just an open conflict. Yeah, my idea was to just ask you to maybe elaborate on that in the context on queer politics, because you had a very interesting input back then.
Yeah, I was thinking a bit more about intersectionality, but this is.
I mean, we can also go back to intersectionality.
No. It's I think that this is it fits well. I'd never, yeah, that fits in very well. Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's always, if you reflect upon it, how your thoughts take you in a direction just because of your privilege. And I recall the conversation, but I hadn't even thought about New Zealand as a developing. Well, New Zealand's not a developing nation, so I kind of had already excluded that. But it does have a history of migration and settlement as a much younger nation than the other nations represented on this call. I think New Zealand, at least from the arrival of the white settlers, is about 170 years old, and the first Polynesians, the first Maori to arrive in New Zealand, even there, I think the scholars agree that it might be about 800 years old. So it's a very young country, but it's also sitting down there at the bottom of the planet. So to get to it in a canoe was a pretty scary experience, I would have thought. So my hat off to the Maori 800 years ago for settling it. But there is a real intersectionality there, or interesting development going on, I would say, with the Pacific Islands, the Polynesian nations, with New Zealand, and the intersection of religion, of their culture, of the white culture, European culture that was brought in, and how that's all playing out. So what Tom, you and I had discussed earlier was particularly around the role of women in the Maori tribal part of New Zealand. So typically women had the right to sing on the marae. So the marae being the tribal grounds, but men had the right to speak on the marae. And as far as I'm aware, there was only one tribe that had an exception to that particular gendered role in the country, which of course became interesting because the New Zealand celebrates the Treaty of Waitangi. So I'm going right into the depths of New Zealandism here, but the founding document of New Zealand is agreed pretty much to be the Treaty of Waitangi, which was between the British Crown and the native tribes when European settlers arrived in New Zealand. And so during Waitangi Day, people travelled to Waitangi, the location, including the Prime Minister, and the Waitangi tribe doesn't allow women to speak on the tribal grounds. In an official capacity is what I'm talking about. Of course, women can speak, but in an official meeting capacity, women don't have a place to speak. And that was a huge debate when New Zealand got its first female prime minister. A huge debate within the tribe, because even the Waitangi tribe is just one tribe hosting, happened to be where the treaty was signed, but it doesn't even, that tribal ground doesn't represent all of the Maori tribes in New Zealand. And so a huge debate over the role of women and how do you tackle that, and of course Maori women were saying, seriously, we've got a female prime minister and women are not allowed to speak on the tribal grounds. What is that all about, right? So from me, with my cultural background, naturally I think that women have got an equal voice to men and should be able to express themselves, but that's not the way that it is done in that tribe. It's not. So I think the way that it was settled was the Prime Minister was given an exception, but I think to the point of this conversation, what's fascinating is how those changes are taking place through globalization. So I don't even think about it so much as developing nations, just globalization in general. I mean, in Samoa, they have a very strong cultural sense, and I know that I'm going to butcher it, of kind of as a third gender. So it's called whakawhine, and it's where a male child is raised in a traditional female role. Now whakawhine have got a very special position in Samoan society. I'm not suggesting that it's a well-respected position, but nevertheless it is a very special, recognized position in Samoan society. But this, notwithstanding the fact that Samoa has always had whakawhine, it's also a highly religious country. Speaking about colonization and missionaries and the role of religion, it's a very religious country, and so it's actually damaged, at least from my perspective on the outside looking in, it's damaged the position of whakawhine in Samoa, because the religion doesn't accept that role of raising a male child and a female role to care, to be the caregiver in the family. Fascinating, I find, the way that is playing out. And unfortunately, there are whakawhine artists and whakawhine out there with voices who are sharing their stories and drawing attention to it. But that whole globalization, intersectionality, developing nation, where that's all going and how that's playing out and how people are identifying themselves and being able to live their own experience, I think is fascinating.
All right. Yeah. I think bringing some really amazing examples that I honestly didn't even know about, which is kind of a shame, to be honest. But yeah, thank you so much. Also, didn't necessarily mean to call New Zealand a developing nation. Not that it is a bad thing, but I just figured with this conflict between the New Zealandian government and the tribes, there is some kind of colonial perspective to it, I guess.
Absolutely, it's and New Zealand is a long way away, so you're well forgiven for not knowing anything about it. But the colonialization is a real, and racism, shockingly, is alive and well in New Zealand. And if you had asked me when I left New Zealand, I would have said, yeah, we've got plenty of Maori. It's there are protests and it's not perfect, but it's fine. What we've seen in the last 10 years is, very conspicuous racism. Maori is one of the three official languages of the country, but sometimes the vitriol about that language, which I find, being a Kiwi, an English-speaking Kiwi, one of the reasons why I moved to Switzerland was to learn a new language. The comfort that the Swiss have with four official languages, and that white racist New Zealanders. I'm not saying that all New Zealand white races, all white New Zealanders are racist, but there's a very vocal, loud minority there who are racist, and their issue with the second language that's being used is shocking to me to see that playing out. When I live in a country where the dialects of German are celebrated, there are 4 official languages, and every product that you buy in the shop's got at least 3 different languages on it, depending on who's picking it up and what it's been purchased for and where it's been purchased. So that the small-mindedness and racism, it's extremely embarrassing and disappointing.
All right. Yeah, it's like I said, it's really interesting just because New Zealand for me is this country that is generally, you always only hear really good things about New Zealand being a very progressive country, being one of the leaders when it comes to happiness and, I don't know, welfare system. So thank you, Ruby. It's kind of shocking, to be honest.
It is a great country. It is a great country, and it believes in equality, and it believes in doing the right thing. And if I think of colonialization globally, and the examples I know best: Australia, Canada, the United States, and New Zealand. New Zealand and Canada are close to the top of at the top of the list for having treated their Indigenous people well, relative to the United States and Australia, who have treated their Indigenous people extremely badly. So I'm not pretending by any stretch of the imagination that the experience of being Maori in New Zealand to talk about intersectionality is great. It's not. You know, they are overrepresented in all the statistics that they shouldn't be overrepresented in, with suicide and poverty, abuse, violence, low education, mortality. I mean, it's a very bleak picture relative to the white population. Having said that, the position of Maori in New Zealand relative to Aborigines in Australia is substantially, quantifiably better. So I don't use that to sort of placate my conscience as a white New Zealander, but the positive stories you do hear about New Zealand are real stories. I mean, they are the experience of being a Kiwi and living in New Zealand is, for the most part, relatively speaking, very good, I would say.
Craig, would you have any analysis of why that might be, comparing the New Zealand Maori experience with the Australian Aborigine experience?
Yeah, so we did. So I did constitutional law. Don't ask me why I was fascinated in it, but I was. And I also did Maori Indigenous law. And for what it's worth, I mean, I'm just, this is my perception, but the mistake that everyone makes is putting New Zealand and Australia in the same boat or the same canoe. It's, you know, the way I explain it to the Swiss, who, you know, when I say I'm from New Zealand and immediately they ask me what's Australia like, I was like, well, you tell me what Moscow's like. It's a 3-hour flight from Zurich to Moscow. It's a 3-hour flight from Wellington to Melbourne. You tell me what the weather's like in Moscow and I'll tell you what the weather's like in Melbourne. You know, it's so that helps already to put it into a context in terms of distance. But the other thing that I think is really significant, and it's a bit of a joke between Australia and New Zealand, but I think nevertheless there's a factual basis for it. Australia was discovered many years by the British before New Zealand was, many years before, and settled by the British many years prior to New Zealand was. And Australia was a penal colony. So a type of person settled in Australia. And from a legal perspective, Australia was declared terra nullius by the British Crown, which is a completely different story to the way New Zealand was settled. New Zealand was settled, I don't know what it was, 100 years after Australia. And the British Crown recognised Maori when they settled it and signed the Treaty of Waitangi. So the legal basis, and I'm not pretending that the law is everything, but again, the lawyer in me comes out. The legal founding concept that created Australia was that there was no law in that land when the British arrived. The people basically didn't exist. They had no legal right. They had no legal system. They had no representation. They had no rights at all. No land rights. No wealth rights. Nothing at all. Terra nullius, which is a shocking thing that the Crown did to the Aboriginal Australians. When they arrived in New Zealand, they recognised that there were tribes there. Now it was politically, dare I say it, it was politically motivated, because the French were on the tails of the British and wanted to settle New Zealand as well. So the British Crown got into a treaty with the Maori and offered the Maori tribes protection. But of course, that protection was all the protection that any invader offers. So brought a whole pile of diseases and death and land confiscation and really terrible things, but kept the French out. From a positive legal perspective, the Maori were recognized as people with their own legal system right from the beginning. Now, it took 150 years for Maori law to be properly recognized in the New Zealand jurisprudence, but it was eventually. The story with the Australian Aborigines is far sadder. So I put a lot of it down to the nature, and I should also say, I guess finally, the settlers who arrived in New Zealand were not. New Zealand was never a criminal, was never a penal colony. The settlers were people that were trying to escape the British class system. And I think that is key. So when Tom talks about hearing good news from New Zealand, I think that is key to understanding the Kiwi mentality. Kiwis wanted to escape all the bad things about being British. So my great grandparents moved from Scotland to New Zealand, and they wanted to get away from the misery of the UK and the class system and not being able to move up and drive themselves forward. And they moved to a country that had at best dirt roads and huts, but they were prepared to do that to get away from what the class system in the UK had given them. And so there's a very strong sense of equality and egalitarianism in the New Zealand psyche that plays out. That's not what Australia is about at all.
That's fascinating.
All right, Frank. Thank you so much for all this really interesting input. And I noticed Mo is back. And since he was rudely interrupted by his dying battery, do you maybe want to continue where you left off? Mo, are you still here? I mean, I already saw you with your camera on.
I think not.
Yes, I'm here. Sorry,
Okay, perfect.
Yes, great. So I'm sorry, I have to put my video off so that I can have to stay on because my internet is not good right now.
All right, no worries. I mean, I completely know the struggle.
And trying to recollect my tool. Yeah. So as I was saying, what I mentioned earlier are some of the ripple effects that affect the underdeveloped or developing countries. And I believe that if we are going to have a global politics, we are supposed to be responsible and also are supposed to acknowledge where we are now and who is lacking, who is supposed to be hard now, where is it so dangerous for our very own people at the moment. I wanted to give an example. An example is this year was actually the year that put Ghana out there worldwide for globally people to know that LGBTQ rights in the country are being trampled upon. That is because Ghana has always been that place where it's seen as, it's welcoming, it's accommodating, the people are so hospitable and all of that, so what can go wrong? But when it happened in February and then we got global attention and seeing how inhumane the population has been to the LGBTQ community here, we had a lot of organization reaching out and being like, oh, I never thought Ghana was this way. That is why we never looked there. I never thought that this is how it was. That is why our energies has never been there, right? So these are some of the things that we need to check. I think that I wouldn't say that underdeveloped or developing countries have some kind of hold or some kind of say in how to get help or something. But then we need to check this. We need to check it. And even in the African context, we have other African countries that are that are more advanced when it comes to LGBTQ rights, but we do not see them joining hands with others that are lacking to reach somewhere, right? The Pan-Africanism is not there. You can only see just a few reaching out and all of that. But I believe that if we have to get a point where we are all connected, and in that way, the global LGBTQ politics would be able to cater for everybody else, and we'll be able to band together and then move forward.
Thank you, Mo. Yeah, that was some really great points about the African countries and the unification in fighting the same battle, pretty much. We would now move on to the next question, I think. Oh, please go ahead. There is a raised hand. Jeffrey, yes.
Yeah, I had a question for Mohammed, if he's available. Are you there?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Chaz.
I'm interested in this phenomenon of what's called political homophobia. The idea that politicians use and leverage hate against LGBT people for their own political purposes and to create scapegoats, to direct attention away from their own corruption, their own lack of good governance and that kind of thing. In the United States, that's happening right now. It has been happening under the previous disgraced president, with trans people especially, harassing trans folk for various reasons, to basically whip up the base. In the situation of Ghana, do you see that happening? Is there sort of deliberate political manipulation of homophobia for political use, or is the situation more kind of grassroots, organic hatred, if there is such a thing as that? That's my question.
I would say it's already happening, and it has happened in the past too. We have mostly, what happens is that whenever there is something serious, all of a sudden you would find the community being in the news, and it will be a whole topic for like 3 days, and then we move on. And that also has to do with the fact that at that point, the community has been so scared for so long that nobody speaks out. So the politicians and everybody, they use that, of course, as a weapon. Because in Ghana currently, the only issue that actually brings everybody together, irrespective of religion, irrespective of culture, irrespective of their background, both rich, poor, is LGBTQ issues. Immediately is mentioned, everybody else has a say in it. And this is what the politicians do. So when you look at the case of I think I mentioned some series of events that happened this year. In the case of the 22 activists that have been jailed, it happened at the same time when the youth in the country decided to come together to hold the government accountable for some of the corruption and some of the things that are not going right in the country. And then there was the hashtag called Fix the Country that was going on, and it was becoming massive, and it was gaining attention in the country. And then all of a sudden, 22 activists, LGBTQ activists, are arrested. And now everybody forgot about the Fix the Country. And now everybody, the momentum that came with Fix the Country has now gone way down. Doesn't have attention anymore. So I believe that it is something that politicians have been able to weaponize against the community, and they are using it to sway people all the time. I remember one of our meetings with one of the diplomats in the country, and we're talking about how the foreign offices and embassies can help in the fight for LGBTQ rights. And they mentioned that it doesn't look politically good for even the president right now to take that a chance to support LGBTQ people. Even if you have a politician in the an MP in parliament who supports gay rights or something, the person is going to voice it out because currently it is not a good time for the person to do that, because politics is about numbers and everybody wants to still hold on to their power for as long as they can. So that is what is happening. Politicians just find a way of pitting people against each other. And in this context, the only thing that actually gets Ghanaians riled up and angry is LGBTQ issues, and they keep using that over and over and over again. And the only reason why this year in February we had international attention was the fact that we decided to speak up. So finally, the LGBTQ community spoke up, and then it became a huge issue. That is even the reason why we had a president coming out to actually speak on the issue, because we've never had it. Every time there is a problem, the president just say one sentence, it's not culture, and it's not about the country. You could, sometimes it comes with one of the conditions that are attached to loans that the government go for. I remember some years back, Theresa May cautioned homophobic countries that are in the Commonwealth that if they do not check and uphold LGBTQ rights, there will be sanctions and all of that. Our then president mentioned that that is never going to happen because Ghana is a Jesus country, right? And everybody was hailing him that he said that. Everybody hailed him. So that is how it is. I think all over the world, especially in homophobic countries, that is what happens. Politicians have a way of capitalizing on the hatred for the community to sway masses and also to gain some kind of support. It happened in Nigeria. It is happening in Ghana currently. It has happened in Uganda and all of that. It's happening.
Yeah. That's very unfortunate.
Yeah, that is very unfortunate, but thank you so much, Jeff, for your question and for on answering it in a very explicit manner. That was very interesting. So now we are moving on to the next cluster of our discussion panel, which is reflection on pride. And the first question in this cluster is, in your opinion, why do we continue to have pride, and why are we continuing the fight? So maybe Mock can start answering that question, because we haven't heard from you in a while.
Okay. Oh, that was really insightful conversation that we have. Oh my god, I just got so immersed into it. Okay. So in my opinion, I think that the situation of Vietnam queer movement is it's been held for kind of maybe around 2 or 3 years until now, because I can say that the movement is kind of lack of intersectionality. That's why we try to brought the conversation of intersectionality into our activism, because actually when we advocate for the equal marriage and for the transgender law, we actually left kind of like multiple community behind, and it's not okay. So why the situation like why there's no law like being out yet? We need to like during that time we need to advocate more to include the marginalized community and other diverse community into that journey with us, so that when the law is out, it will be like accessible and inclusive to everyone. And that's why the pride needs to be carry on, because we need more space and open space for the intersectionality communities, and especially for the youth and adolescent community generation to be in that space, and they can talk about the issue, talk about their visibility in the movement, and that's what makes the movement become. That's what makes the movement. It actually leaves no one behind.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, I completely agree with you here, and I see that some of our participants are already having questions, but we would kindly ask you to leave it for the Q&A part of our panel discussion. And we also wanted to ask Craig on the question, just because I know that we had quite an interesting discussion with you about it when we were preparing the questions, and you were the one who brought it up and gave us the idea for it. So maybe you can come in and tell us more.
I'm breathing and thinking. So I don't recall exactly what we discussed around this point. I mean, for me, because we have to, and it's the right thing to do. I mean, that is it is as simple as that. So Pride is a protest. And I think I said at the beginning, what I take pride in about Pride is the fact that we do it with love. So when what kind of horrified me, and I think horrified LGBTI people in Switzerland, is in the evening news when a group collects the 50,000 signatures to take a law to the vote. The news shows them presenting these boxes of the 50,000 signatures at the Bundesplatz, at the federal government square, and there was a fight. Not a vicious fight, but nevertheless a fight for being in front of the camera between the Christians and between the LGBTI activists, and we don't do that. We did it at Stonewall. We did it in New York. We had enough. We did a gutsful of the abuse that we had suffered. But for the most part, Pride is a non-violent protest. We are the sons. In my case, we are the daughters. We are the trans children. We are the brothers, the sisters, the aunts and the uncles. And in my case, I'm a parent. So we are real people living out there, and we have to continue to fight. so that in Switzerland same-sex marriage is legal, so that in Ghana you have the right just to say that I am gay, and not be destroyed because of that. So I believe that what's inherent to humans is the right to be treated the same and to be treated for who you are and be respected for the innate value of who you are. And for me, that is what pride is all about. It is about saying, I'm here, you have to listen to my story, not come at me with your story, but listen to my story about who I am, how I identify myself, and give me the respect of the person that I am. And that's why we need to continue to do it. So even in Canada, where same-sex marriage has been around, I think, since 2003, even in Canada, pride is still a thing, right? They still have pride parades in Toronto to continue to emphasize that, and in a very heteronormative world. So for people who are not familiar with that term, a heteronormativity is this concept that everything that we see and perceive is seen through this man, woman, daughter, son, white picket fence, and kind of the New Zealand, American, British version of the world, right? A mum and a dad, a daughter and a son, a white picket fence, heterosexual, perfect little white picket fence family. Without even realizing what we're seeing, the world has presented it to us most of the time in a heteronormative perspective. And companies, from a commercial perspective, it makes sense, right? Because most of the world is heteronormative. It is. And so companies want to reach the largest audience, unless they're going for a niche group, or they're brave. They want to go for the safest, largest audience, which is that 80%, 75%, whatever the number is. And so everything that we're presented is heteronormative. The woman lying on a car, selling that car. Holy moly, what has a half-naked woman got to do with selling a car? It's got everything to do with selling a car to a heterosexual man who somehow is attracted to that woman lying on the car. It means nothing to me, wrong market, but you can see where that's coming from, right? So pride is also a statement about saying we're here. We're not invisible. We are part of the kaleidoscope and color and fabric of society, and this is what we bring.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much for that input, Craig. Jeffrey, how about you? What's your opinion as the professor on the topic? Why do we still have pride? Why do we still continue the fight, even though it's kind of obvious, but from a political standpoint, like, why are we still at it?
Well, Tom, as someone who is actually putting on a pride event, why don't we ask you?
Yeah, I like the twist on it. So from my perspective,
sure.
I would say it's very important that we continue the fight, just because in the recent years, I mean, I can only talk about my very limited European perspective, but in the recent years, we've seen a backsliding, I think it's called, where certain countries in Europe have just been moving. Well, they've been regressing. They've not been progressing. And most importantly for me would be Poland, where these ultra conservative forces have just taken over the government and are trying to basically disrupt all the fight and all the efforts that prior generations, prior people have put into the topic. And that is the very reason why we should continue to have pride, even in those places where one would assume that theoretically we are doing really good compared to other countries where openly saying that you're not heteronormative is already almost being a death threat to yourself. So yeah, I hope that answered your question, or your twist question, Jeffrey. And
Yeah.
Maybe you can answer it too.
I think that was a very good answer. I think there is the issue of visibility that both of you spoke to, and I think that's very important. It's also part of a humanizing gesture. People can be homophobic without ever meeting someone who is gay or trans, right? Once you have them in your community, in your friendship circle, in your family, attitudes change. So on several levels, the issue of visibility, I think, is very important. I think there's one more element that gives value to Pride events, and I'm very honored to be part of this one that you guys are doing now. And that's the possibility of experiencing solidarity, people being in the same space, greeting one another face to face. As Craig was discussing heteronormativity, you can let those assumptions and negotiations of heteronormativity, let them go by the wayside and be among people who accept you and have some understanding of you as you are in your most authentic ways. And I think that is a value that people often aren't able to capture. People in the LGBTQ community are often isolated, especially as young folk. And being able to experience in an embodied way a mass of people that are sort of by definition accepting of you, all things being equal, I think is another value that goes with the Pride tradition.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much for your answer. And frankly, you raised points that I honestly didn't even think about. So yeah, thank you so much. And for the next question, we figured that it would be smart to talk about the commercialization of Pride done by Western corporations. I think we've all noticed that all of a sudden, from one day to another, all the logos of the companies changed, and basically everywhere you can see a rainbow right now, except in very certain places like the Middle East when it comes to regional, I don't know, Instagram accounts or whatever you may want to say. So my question would be, especially for Mark right now, just because we really haven't heard all that much from you, and I want to give you as much space as you deserve for being here today. What's your take on this? I mean, on one side, I guess it's good for more greater visibility, but yeah, what's your take on it?
Oh, hello. Okay. Okay. So yeah, I think that the pink washing is kind of not only just like harmful to the community, it also like invades the community spaces in the Pride month, and especially like in my experience, like when I organizing the Pride event in Ho Chi Minh City, and there was friends who like donor and supporter to the Pride event. It's kind of big in Ho Chi Minh at the time, and there was two friends. They are competitors to each other, and they are both participate in the Pride event, and then you can see them compete like every meter of their visibility in that event, and it's at the end of the day, it's more like the friend pride, not the community pride. It's, and it's really harmful when you think about it, because the pride is like where the community have the chance, the space to talk about this issue, and show their visibility, to make the statement that we here, we queer, right? And then when the commercialization and the brands step in and then take that space, it's become a toxic environment, because the community cannot have their visibility anymore. So I think that as a friend and also as ally, you need to acknowledge your knowledge and your space, and you need to educate yourself to not to step up on the community space. I think that's important for friends or corporation to think about it. Not like you, not like sorry, I lost my words. Not like you did nothing for the community, and then where everyone has their attention to the pride and the LGBTIQ community, you step in and then you benefit from them, and then you get away without actually contribute to the movement. It's actually really disturbing to me, and it's kind of really I think it's really toxic, and we need to call out those friends who actually do harm to the movement. Sorry, it's 2 a.m. in my town, so I'm kind of lost in my words right now. But that's the spirit.
It's all good.
You know it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for your contribution. And I think all of us really appreciated that you and Jeffrey are doing this at an unholy hour for you, where you're just wishing off going to sleep. And yeah, we're really thankful that you're here tonight, or today, this morning, whichever time is more appropriate for you at this point. Yeah, thank you so much for your contribution. What also would be interesting to me, and I think many would be most perspective on this, just because we already talked about how Ghana has this really polarizing aspect on it. And honestly, I would be curious whether it's something done that is also visible in Ghana, just because most bigger companies are selling pride-inspired stuff these days.
Hi. No, the companies here in Ghana, even the international ones, they are not taking the chance. They are not taking those chances. No. I haven't personally. I haven't seen any company that has done that. The ones I have probably seen would be the embassies, and these are not, they are diplomats. They are diplomatic and all of that, so it's fine. But when we talk about the companies, no, I believe that when you pick a company like Coca-Cola and all the rest, they are international. So during this month, you see them supporting Pride Month, out there and everything. But in Ghana, no, it's not possible, because they also have to survive in this country. And at this point, surviving in the country doesn't involve supporting LGBTQ publicly. I would give it just one example. I don't know how that connects, but then again, something like the Australian High Commissioner, when he came to Ghana, he has been very vocal about LGBTQ rights in Ghana and all of that, changing the mindset and everything. So when it happened, when the event in February happened, now he had so much backlash, and there was so much stories that came up that he is sponsoring the movement and he's sponsoring the advocacy and all of that, which was not true actually. But you know, it is what was run with. So when you this is a typical example of what could happen to other, you know, private entities or other commercial companies, you know, with the global presence. It's not there. But then I could say that some things are changing a bit. Quite recently, I think 2 days or 3 days ago, I had a call from one fashion school here in Ghana asking me on my take of them celebrating Pride as a school here in Ghana and what I would advise on how they should go about it. And this is just one instance that I have personally witnessed, right? That there is this Ghanaian company that is open to do something like this, but then it's still being cautious. So we spoke. I haven't seen them do anything yet, but you know. So it's like that. There is no presence of pride whatsoever in the country. And even in the past, these going back to these embassies and diplomats, in the past they do not even hoist the flag of the rainbow in the country here. But then in consultations and all of that from us, you know, they were able to they are now able to do some things like that. And also they are doing that with the ideology the Ghanaians, you know, still have behind their mindset that, you know, it's a foreign thing, and so far as they are foreigners, it's okay for them to hoist a flag in the embassy because, of course, diplomatically, that area is not even seen as a Ghanaian. This thing, you know, it has to wherever an embassy is seen as the country, right? That kind of thing. So it's there, but no company in Ghana here publicly celebrates Pride. No, I haven't seen any.
Thank you so much, Mo, for again stepping up and bringing all of these great points. What I also think is interesting to hear from Craig and Jeffrey, maybe some sort of the Catholic critique on the topic. Maybe you can step in and share with us.
Perhaps if I go first, Jeff, this time. So I'm quite pragmatic about this, and perhaps it comes from being a 45-year-old, but going back to that kind of topic of heteronormativity, when I grew up, the only obviously gay person was Elton John, and apparently he had a wife at the time. So there were no role models, right? This was an extremely heteronormative world back in the 80s, right? That seeing LGBTI people was the exception, and they were very often not out, and they were very needy people or the abused people in media. So fast forward 20, 30, 40 years, and we've reached a world where my company doesn't even participate in Pride in London because it's so hard and so expensive to get a place in the parade. It's like, holy moly, wow, we've gone from one extreme of invisibility to the other extreme of extreme commercialism. That does reflect the Western world, the developed world. It does. That is the world, and I would say in terms of same-sex marriage in the United States in particular, so it's not a Swiss experience of the political discourse, but if you look at the way same-sex marriage was discussed and dealt with in the United States, you had companies coming out very publicly, the Apples and the Microsofts and the Googles and whatever else, coming out and very publicly fighting and supporting and funding same-sex marriage. No, that's quite an American way of managing this. But where I sit on this, I mean, does it sometimes stink of hypocrisy? Yes. Does it sometimes kind of stink of like, you know, you're coming late to the game and now it's kind of cool and trendy to be seen as being LGBTI positive? Yes. Is it fashionable at the moment to talk about I&D? Yes, for sure. But the very practical part of my personality that works in this environment says, well, okay, if this is the wave that I'm riding at the moment, and if this wave can make a positive impact to the experience of being LGBTI+, if it can, then okay, I'm prepared to put away the stink for a while at least and take advantage of what this is to continue to drive the pride forward. So I know that sounds like I've sold my soul, but I also see that while there are plenty of negatives, there are also plenty of positives to take from the experience of commercialization of pride. Over to you, Jeff.
Okay, counterpoint. I want to quote from a famous LGBTQ activist. It's a paraphrase. Intersectionality means leaving nobody behind. I think that's what Mohammed said a few minutes ago. And if we take that seriously, my question would be, how far would we hold corporations who sponsor Pride events accountable for their actions in the world? So if you talk about intersectionality, LGBTQI people are homeless, they're disabled, they're indigenous people. So should people who are sponsoring Pride events be more sensitive to things like gentrification, when land prices go up and people get removed from their housing and can't afford housing? Should they be more sensitive to dragging pipelines across indigenous land, where those indigenous people might have actually a category of a third gender kind of person in their own heritage? And there is, and Craig just mentioned this, not being able to participate in London Pride because of the cost. That corporate sponsorship comes to be a kind of gentrification itself. And this has happened actually in Osaka, which has had a small Pride event now for about 15 years now. And the smaller grassroots groups have a hard time paying for the booths for the day because the price has risen, because there are other people who will pay for them. And Tokyo Pride is amazing, moving from the Gap to Deloitte to Mizuho Bank, Facebook, Google. They're all there, and they're all very visible. And then there's my friend walking around with a sign, because that's the best she can do, advocating for depathologization of transgender. So I think there are issues to look at. I think the corporate sponsorship will take the movements so far toward gay marriage and kind of welcoming into the system as it is. But I think corporate sponsorship gets a little bit nervous when things about concentrations of capitalism come up for discussion. Lack of responsibility for paying adequate taxes, which is a huge problem in my country, in the United States. Those kind of things. So I think it's worth thinking about the effect of corporate sponsorship in the context of intersectionality and all the diverse kinds of people who are affected by global flows of capital. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that very different perspective. We haven't even grasped that when we were talking about that particular question, so this is very interesting. And moving on to what we got, what we got for the last part of the reflection on the Pride is the question of whether or not you would like to bring up a topic or aspect that have not yet been mentioned. Maybe you have something in mind, or maybe you have a comment, or so how about we go with Mark first?
Yeah. Actually, I just think of something now, like and we have the conversation about intersectionality and the diverse of identity. Also, I want to highlight the importance of the youth and adolescent generation. Like, I think that they are like they are the key to a more inclusive society now. Like, you see, the most of in Vietnam, most of the grassroots organizations are led by the young generation, and they actually living in the society with seeing the impact of the patriarchy and the racism, the homophobia and transphobia, etc. The young generation, they witness all the things, and they educate themselves to recognize the power structure in our society. And I think that's the important thing to work on the activism, because the activism needs to be radical and intersectional, and it will lead to like the more inclusive. I can't think anything else but inclusive, and yeah, and in Vietnam, we actually, when we talk about the importance of the grassroots level organization and the young generation activists, leader, they are passionate, and they have access to higher education, but they lack of the essential resources to work on the activism effectively. And it's kind of there's the power of presence within the activism itself. It's like so if a grassroots organization, they want to carry on the activism, they might have to they have to rely on a big other big organization that like have that essential resources, and there have been like several LGBT activists have to leave the activism because they got burned out, because they can't do the activism that they want to do. They can raise their voice about the stigma and discrimination that they face, and it's kind of like it's kind of messed up because not so many people in the activism talk about it right now, like and actually when we in the regional space, like when I participate in the regional space, I have a chance to talk with the donor, to the, like, you know, the donor for organization, the LGBTIQ organization in the region in Southeast Asia, and actually the donor acknowledge that situation, that the grassroots are not empowered enough, so they are not taking care enough to be visible in the movement. But there's no, like, there's still not a way to resolve it. So the grassroots organizations still suffer from, like, being taken advantage of and get burned out and exhausted from the activism. I think that's really messed up, and I hope that the young generation they can know that, like, they can get help and get the support that they need, like in another place, or like they can reach out for help in a region. And I think that yeah, I don't know what to say anymore. But yeah.
Thank you so much for the input and for the highlighting the importance of educational system and how it is also important for the activism itself. Just because activism doesn't just evolve, it has to have its roots from somewhere. And this is a very important topic, I agree. Just because over the world, why are we doing that? Because there are people who are active, who strive to achieve certain goals, and this is, of course, a very important aspect to highlight. I don't want to point fingers here. I just want to know if one of our other panelists have anything else to add to the topic, or maybe some aspects that we should still touch upon. Please feel free to just jump in and do so. But if not, then we will also move on to the Q&A part.
Nothing else to add from your side? Just making sure that I'm not missing anything. Okay, perfect. Yeah, first off, from my side, thank you so much for participating in our Pride panel discussion. And again, thank you so much for participating, even though for you, it's really not the greatest time of day right now to participate in a discussion like this. So we really appreciate it. But obviously, we also really appreciate that Mo and Craig, you also participate. I mean, I don't want to downplay your role. And yeah, thank you so much. I mean, let's move on to the Slido then. So we, where do I have it? Here we go. Let me just rearrange some stuff. There we go. Yeah, people were already kind enough to raise some questions, 6 to be more exact. And feel free to raise more while we're talking about it. And the very first question is, how should bisexual invalidation be dealt with? And I think the person tries to refer to how bisexuality in the LGBTQ+, I hope I got the alphabet right, communities is often regarded as less important, or maybe even as like this cry for attention, even though they aren't necessarily part of the community or the communities. Do you guys maybe have an approach how to change that or stop that?
Hi, hello. So I think that falls under breaking stereotypes. I think most well, of course, I am submitting this in my country's context, so others too can speak on it. So the kind of problems that we face in this country obviously makes it quite easier to force yourself as a gay man to play the role of a bisexual, and in a way, it also kind of disturbs the how would I put it? It enforces biphobia in a way, because here we are having someone who has to publicly show that he has a girlfriend, like, right, and then privately he is with a guy. Same with the lesbians too. All in they are supposed to survive, and that's true. But then in this case, finding companionship, true companionship and true partnership is not there. And in this, in turn, it hurts other acronyms in the community. It makes other acronyms feel less, like a second option, or because we don't have the freedom to love and the freedom to marry, there is no future for queer relationships. So this also enforces the biphobia that exists. So how do we break this? It's a whole bunch of systemic thing that we have to look at for us to get there, because bisexuality is valid, right? And to some extent, you are, as a bisexual person, you are attracted to two genders, right? That is the definition of bisexuality. So in the current one, it doesn't have to be just a man and a woman. It could be a man and a different gender, and a woman and a different gender, and goes on and on. And so, in this case, and in that case, it doesn't mean that you are supposed to be with them together at one point. It's about at the moment who you are attracted to, or the gender you're attracted to. That is what makes you bisexual. But in this context, you are supposed to hold on to both. One for solace and one for safety. So this further enforces the biphobia that happens. So you see a lot of people coming out to say something like, bisexuality is circumstantial. It doesn't exist. It's that and that. But then it does exist. Just that we find ourselves in a system whereby it is not favorable to be bisexual. And quite recently too, I have realized that the whole woke agenda that is starting to spring up sexually is also coming through the bisexuality door, and also pansexuality too, because now people are easily tag themselves as these to look progressive, to look woke, to score some kind of points, right? It looks like it's now in vogue to be fluid. You understand? So there are so many things that enforces the biphobia that we see every day. And for us to be able to change that, we need to actually go back to the root cause of oppression and discrimination. And if we are able to correct that, which I know that it's not going to be easy, it's a very, very, very long journey to change that. But then a day at a time, we can keep on advocating, keep on educating people on these various sexualities and genders that exist. And in some way, as more people are open to knowing these things, it will lessen the phobias that exist, which includes biphobia. So yeah.
All right, thank you, Mel. Yeah, that answer was very extensive and really good. Thank you so much. Mark, Craig, Jeff, do you want to add anything, or do you think everything has been said?
I've got a question for Jeff. if that's okay, around this, because this is something that I think is so. So there's a question that you had around, I think, terminology, but I guess we're not having it. But I think it kind of relates to this topic. And one of the things I struggle with is the word queer. So I do not identify myself as queer. Okay, I have struggled so hard for my whole life to not be queer. I am normal. I am on the spectrum for sure, but I am normal. I'm not queer. Okay, so I really struggle with the, and again, it's the lawyer in me and my background and where I grew up in New Zealand in the 80s and 90s, and this is the baggage that I bring. But I struggle with that word queer. I'm very comfortable with the word gay. Then you've got people that are saying, well, I'm bisexual and I'm not being recognized as being bisexual. And then the other part of my mind is going, well, look, there's asexual and no sexual and gender neutral and gender fluid and all of these terms that are out there now to describe or not describe people. And in principle, I'm perfectly comfortable with that. And I think I said earlier that who we are and the intrinsic value of who we are and what we bring to the table is all that matters. And that the experience of being LGBTI is that you can't bring your baggage to me. I need to bring my baggage to you, right? That is it, because as soon as you're bringing your baggage to me, you're defining me in the way that you want to define me, rather than giving me a voice and allowing me to define myself in the way that I see myself. But having said that, and I read an interesting article about that. You know, one of the arguments was, originally we called ourselves gay, and everyone was comfortable with that, except that suddenly we weren't comfortable with it because we wanted to call ourselves lesbian as well, because we're not gay, because we're lesbian. And then naturally what happened is exactly what was expected to happen. We became LGBTI plus, or LGBTQ, or LGBT plus, or that, and the LGBTI plus community is struggling to come to a landing on what that means to define ourselves. And perhaps this is just the journey. But Jeff, this is where I bring up my age and my own bias, and really am interested to hear what your understanding and view on this almost dichotomy within trying to box ourselves but not box ourselves at the same time.
That's a big issue. But I think you've hit on many of the important points. I think there is a sense of queer as it is used, certainly in queer theory, which and maybe a street use, that is kind of a self-marginalization. It takes a position vis-a-vis the establishment, right, of heteronormativity. Which I'm sure you have that position, but there's something about the queer term that captures a kind of larger segment of alienation, I think, and oppositional consciousness, right? In some uses. And then in other uses, it's simply a one syllable instead of the enumerated letters. But it also overrides all those discrete identity categories. And kind of it suggests that there are times when we don't need all those identity categories. If you are troubled by the system, the heteronormative system as it is, then you're queer. And you're one of us, and it kind of where exactly doesn't matter in some points. But the other tendency is the enumeration of identity categories for recognition, right? The LGBTQ, AI, two spirits, 𝗂𝐫𝐚𝐢𝐿, if you're in India, which finally has no solution either, because there's always this increasing urge for precision. I've noticed just from my students recently that the term transgender, which in my understanding has been the umbrella category, right? Any gender diverse outside of the gender binary could be transgender. It was very open. But now I hear students referring to transgender and non-binary. That non-binary has been moved out from under the transgender umbrella, which kind of leaves trans to be more of moving between binary genders, and then the non-binary is an alternative. I think these movements will never end. What they do in the United Nations, which has to deal with a variety of societies with indigenous categories and terminologies, they use the term SOGI or SOGI. Does anyone know that? Do you, Mark, do you see that in your ASEAN documents?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I do know about SOGI. I think now it's extended to SOGIesque. You know, it's sexual characteristics have been added.
Yeah, so that means sexual orientation and gender identity, expression, and sexual characteristics.
Sex characteristics.
Yeah.
For the interested people.
Which doesn't name discrete identity groups. It names axes of discrimination. All of these characteristics around which people get discriminated against, or get unrecognized, or get punished somehow, get stigmatized. And there's no need in many cases to name them all individually. You can say discrimination on the basis of that word that Muhammad just pronounced, SOGIesque. Right. It's a different kind of approach to language. I guess we'll keep having increasingly refined and differentiated language categories. I don't know how that can be helped. So I didn't solve anything, just a few observations. I would say, just if you want a little bit of perspective from Japan, the most visible and active intersex person in Japan is adamant that first, sex is not a gradation, and second, that intersex is not an in-between identity. And there's some people who have intersex conditions who wouldn't see the point in aligning themselves with transgender and gay and lesbian. It's a physical condition that can manifest in a variety of different kinds of identity attachments, which is different from something like gay, which is by definition a non-heteronormative attachment. Just remember that. But there are there certainly are intersex people who do identify as non-binary, queer in some ways. But we should let them define that in their own daily rounds. But it has been kind of systematically included in the enumerations. Yeah.
There's actually a story that I want to say, like in Vietnam, like for around over 10 years ago, when the community meets online, they usually go to the forum. So at that time, there's not like the trans men forum. There's the lesbian forum and the trans men. Because at that time in Vietnam, we don't have the definition for trans men. So the trans men community, they think that they belong to the lesbian community. Like they identify as like soft butch community. And later on, maybe 2 or 3 years later, when actually the trans men community don't feel belong to the lesbian community, because by definition the lesbian community identifies like as a woman who loves women, but the trans men community, they don't identify themselves as a woman. They don't belong there. They don't feel belong there, and then yeah, and having that struggle, they have to do the research by themselves, and they found out the term trans men, and it's like a ignite moment for them, so they can find their label, and they can feel like they belong to the community. And that's since that moment, the trans men community has like have their own space, and then they can support each other and solidar and be in the solidarity with other community in the movement. So I think it's that why we need to have variety label and just to make sure that people feel comfortable with themselves.
Yeah, make sense of themselves, be legible to themselves and to others. Can I ask Mark a question?
Oh, yeah, sure.
I'm curious. I know in Indonesia and Thailand there is a category of tom or tomboy, which is basically kind of an indigenous category that preceded the language of trans man. And I'm curious, in Vietnam, do you have indigenous Vietnamese terminology for non-normative gender positions or sexual orientation?
Actually, because in Vietnam, people don't see the LGBTIQ community as separate identity. They see the LGBTIQ as the whole community. So you see that if the public see male assigned birth having female women expression, they will call them like the term queer, but it's like but it's actually a slur, and then the community reclaim that slur to call themselves as yeah, and yeah, there's slang, there's indigenous term for the diverse sexual orientation and gender identity, but because in Vietnamese, I don't know how to explain this, but we have term for women look like men, and we have terms for men look like women, kind of something like that.
Yeah, but that hasn't been incorporated into the LGBTQI community. That kind of terminology.
Yeah, actually, because we reclaim that term again, because actually, in the past, the public will use that slur to dehumanize the LGBT community, and in recent years, we use that term to call the LGBT community as a more lifestyle way to talk about the community, and we make it more positive to use that term. So actually, it's kind of being neutral right now when using that term. But I think, in my opinion, I think that it's good for the community to use that term, but not for the cis and hetero community.
Right.
No, cis and hetero community. They like, if you are not a member of the LGBT community, don't use that term.
Got it. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much for all the input. Ruby, during the actual discussion, raised the desire to raise a question for Craig and you, Jeff. Ruby, feel free to jump in and ask your question.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, and I send my question to Craig and my professor Jeffrey from Japan, my ex-professor, and I have always been an advocate or an ally for all the marginalized group of people, but I have a question, and please listen to it. Based to law and human rights, universality, ethics and moral values are not universal law and cannot be justified at universal level. But respect of indifference and other social constructed values should not be extended to other societies. How can I voice my voice to the right of the LGBT community, to the LGBTQI plus right people in the low developing areas, yet their voices are silenced, and decision making is not in their hands and will never be understood. Thank you very much. Just in case I can repeat myself.
That sounded like a legal question to me, Craig.
If I understood the question correctly, it is, and please tell me if I'm paraphrasing it incorrectly, but it's how can we lend our support to people who are in a jurisdiction, in a legal situation where they have no voice themselves? Is that the essence of the question?
Maybe to be clear, I'll say like colonialism and decolonialism still exist, and it takes power in every decision making. But as an ally and a voice to the group of people, to the group of the LGBTQI community in my society? How can I raise my voice in the society where also ethical rights, social values, traditional values are still relevant, but also we still have this universal law? How can I raise the voice in that stagnant situation of universality? How can I speak about the rights of how can these people, how can the allies that I'm speaking to, like, how can they have their voice? Yet everything is not universal. Some voices are not involved in decision making, or there is a universal voice that speaks to the other, and other voice has to come in as an additional. How can we make it as a universal rule where it makes sense ethically and in every sense?
So thank you for the question, and I need to be careful that I don't get upset trying to answer it, because while I am the commercial capitalist voice of the LGBTI people on this panel today, I care, right? I care, and I have 2 children, and the reason why I do what I do is not because of me. I've got very broad shoulders, and frankly, I couldn't care less what someone else thinks of me. But I want the world to be a better place for my children. I want the world to be a better place for the people who have taken time to join this call today and listen to my story, and listen to Marg's, and listen to Marco's, and listen to Jeff's insights, and listen to us. There are many ways to answer that question. When I went to law school, there are 2 political theories. There's naturalism and I can't remember what the other one's called, but either way, one is it talks about whether law comes from the essence of being human, or whether law comes from the process. So the fact that the Governor General in New Zealand signs the law, that 50 plus 1% of the people in Parliament, the politicians, pass the law, and then the Governor General signs the law, that makes it the law. That's a legal theory. And then the other legal theory is that the nature of being human, there are certain inalienable rights, kind of thinking about the United Nations and the way the world works, and where we want to go to. I have in my personal experience, I see colonialization, I see religion, I see male hierarchy, patriarchy. I see them as all the same. I see them as all the same. The reason why I call myself a feminist is because women stand, for the most part, against those structures. And our success in the LGBTI space will be the success of women. Now, whether that's lesbian women or heterosexual women, cis women, whatever, women have got there's actually more women on the planet than there are men, even though women don't get treated the same as men. But I see, through my privilege and the experience of being a white male, and with speaking English and being tall and having blue eyes and brown hair and all the rest, all of the privilege that this gives me, education, all the rest of it, I nevertheless see that the role of women is fundamental and key, and it also ties in with this whole idea that I've mentioned a couple of times around a non-violent approach to change. So being female and driving that change and standing up for the rights of women, whether it was getting the vote or whether it's saying that, you know, I want to express who I am as a woman. You know, you can't rape me for what I choose to wear. You can't tell me, state what I do with my body. Those are fundamental fights in the LGBTI space, even though we don't think of them as being fundamental fights in the LGBTI space. The fight for women to be recognized and free of religion and patriarchy and all of those processes and structures and everything that we have in the way is what's going to change the world. So my heart breaks when I hear about what the situation is in Ghana and in Poland even, which is not so far away from where I live actually, and in the UAE or Singapore. My heart breaks. You know, I live a fabulous life with a fabulous family, with a great support network, and I've got a great job in a very safe country where I can be more or less exactly who I am, even if the law doesn't recognize that. My heart breaks when I hear the stories around my LGBTI brothers and sisters and what they are doing. But I think the success of what we're doing, whether we think that it's process or whether we think that it's innate to who we are as humans, that women will be key fundamentally at the end of the day to making that change. I hope that kind of answers that PhD question.
Thank you so much. Let me wait for my Professor 𝗃𝗱𝗂𝗋𝗃's insight.
Well, thank you for that, Greg. I could actually make a link with that. When you talk about the importance of women, what I'm led to think about is women's domestic roles, which have been around care. Women, most of us were raised by women, nurtured and suckled by women, and protected in our most vulnerable times by women. I think that's just a general trend I would notice. And from that, I think of this idea of an ethics of care that I would promote as a universalizable value. You basically brought up, Ruby, the question of kind of cultural relativity. The idea that in their society, they think that there is no Ghanaian gay people, that they're following Western imperialism, that there's no native African gay. To that, I would just say they're wrong, and that they need to deal with that. They need to deal with a human being who's fully conscious, who's sentient, who's capable of loving and being loved, and they need to deal with that person, accommodate them into their social world. And if they can't, then they are wrong. And that's a position that seems to be completely lacking in legal reasoning, in logical reasoning, but it is a baseline. And here's as simple reasoning as I could get. That the baseline is, if no one picks on someone for who they are, then everyone collectively is better off. That harassing someone does the harasser no good in any kind of sustainable way. It might feel good at the time. It might bring some power with your idiot buddies at the time, but it's not finally sustainable. And I think if you want to put this in kind of colonial terms, what I'm thinking of is what in Christianity they often call the golden rule. Do unto others as you would be done upon yourself. That's a paraphrase. Which means, in a practical way, recognizing other people as subjects as you are a subject. That other people feel the same kind of pain and have the same kinds of needs for social association and for safety and for comfort that anyone else does. And everything that goes against that principle is bullying, essentially. And finally, self-defeating. So the principle that we engage with each other in ways that the other can thrive the best they can with what they have is just a rule. And I guess that's the rule of love, which Craig has mentioned several times.
Mm-hmm.
And if people are wrong, they're wrong. I'm not afraid to tell Christians who think God cares about who's sticking what in what body part. What kind of small God is that? That sounds like a God that's a projection of small people. I piss on that God. Because he's small enough to have that done to them.
Thank you.
I don't want that God. I don't obey that God who would harass gay people and lesbians.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. 1 minute, Ida. Like, just a remark for a Professor 𝗃𝗱𝗂𝗃𝗱𝗃𝗃 and Craig in the position of the law. Don't you think it's, as a feedback, not to answer it now, don't you think it's high time to think about those laws that we had constructed in past and reform them in the way that we include every voice? And for Jeffrey and also other professors in the audience to include those voices, because when they are included, there won't be injustice that we see today. Because in Ghana, in Africa, in Rwanda, in Uganda, where I come from, people are suffering. But why are they suffering? It's because of those universal laws that we formulated. Thank you very much, Tom and Ida, to give me this opportunity. I give the floor to other people to present.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ruby. But Mark, you had your hand up for quite some time, so feel free to jump in.
But yeah, it's like more for your information, because the question before was about like how to make room, how to like to talk about the problem when the society is not giving you that space. So I happen to learn about to study about the sustainable development goals, the SDG, and I happen to know that like many countries have agreed to achieve the SDG by the end of 2013, and their organization and their also the legal institution, like their legal department who works on SDG, and what we can do as a community, as activists, we go to that place, we look into the SDG, we see like we try to like give insight about the gender equality, the like the diversity message into that department, and that's how we can like make our visibility. Like, hey, you talk about safe in work environments, right? So how about the women? How about the safe in workplace for women, for example? That's how we make our visibility, and yeah, because that department, that organization, they already agree to achieve the sustainable development goals. So actually they need to plan a strategy to achieve that, and that's where we can like sneak into and be visible. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that contribution. And unfortunately, I have to be a little bit blunt right now. Nothing about you, though. So we've been going on for quite some time now, and I know that in Japan it's starting to get pretty late, or well, early at this point. So I would suggest, or we would suggest, that we would do one last question, and on the Slido we have one question specifically for Mo, and after that we would wrap up this, in my opinion, amazing event today. And if sufficient interest would be there, we could always try to have a follow-up event where we try to address other questions that were raised. But again, like I said, we've been at this for quite some time, and I think everybody's starting to get a little bit tired. So the question for Mo is, how does the oppression of queer Ghanaians link to other forms of oppression in the country?
So the one of the concepts that Ghanaians don't seem to grasp is that oppression generally is linked, and the oppression of one group leads to the oppression of another. It's just like in a human context, it's just like immediately you are allowed to do something to someone or to something, you are comfortable to do it to another person. So it also has to do with power, right? If you give power to the government to oppress other people, the same way other people who are more powerful than you would give the government the power to oppress you when it doesn't favor them. I like to always give my submissions with examples. Just our neighbors, the Nigeria. I don't know if anybody is following what is happening in Nigeria currently. So the previous president, Goodluck Jonathan, he was the one who signed the legislation against LGBTQ people in the country, and this was done largely because of the Christian values that majority of Nigerians hold up. It's a sin and all of that. So, but that was signed into it. It's called the SSMPA. It's a sexual. I don't remember, but yeah, it's the SSMPA. And fast forward to this current president in Nigeria, who is a Northerner, and if you follow the politics of Nigeria critically, you can see that the Northerners are different from the Southerners. This has to do with tribe and religion. Predominantly in the North, they are Muslims, and then the South are Christians and other tribes. And now they have a Northerner and a Muslim as a president. And just recently, he made reference to a war that happened in Nigeria that killed almost 1 million Southerners. And he made reference to that because some of the Southerners were trying to break away from the federal state due to lack of attention from the government. So when you look at it closely, in the previous government, these Southerners pushed their president president to legislate against LGBTQ, thereby giving the government that power. And then now they have a different president who now equally has that same power, which the Northerners are giving him that power to discriminate against the Southerners. So it just goes on and on. The same way when they have somebody else in power, some other people would give the government power to oppress other people. So the oppression just goes on and on and on. And okay, coming down to the concept of queerness. In Ghana here, as I mentioned earlier, the far-right believers who have family Christian values, who are the anti-gay group here in Ghana, they keep hammering on the fact that they have this holistic center where they are changing gay people to be straight. They don't want to use conversion therapy. They don't want to use that term. They're saying it's holistic and it's biblical and all of that. So in this case, if in the case where magically these gay people are rehabilitated, which in their case they say they have over 1,000 gay people they are rehabilitated currently, which we still do not know who they are. We've not seen them. If they are able to do that and they come out, they are going to be that product that are dumped on women. You understand? To validate their heterosexuality. And in this case, to further, they are further oppressing women in the right that women do not have the right to choose the people they want to marry. Right. So that's reinforcing that. So you can see the link of the oppression of gay people to women in the country. The same thing applies to the same thing applies to the disabled. Currently in the country, I remember. Sorry, no. Let me just put the disabled people on the side. This same anti-gay group, in one of their submissions, their general secretary mentioned that he is albino. So, albino, and they are also considered as a minority group. He's albino, and then he was asked that, so if he meets an albino who is queer, is he going to relate to the person on the level of an albino? And does he actually know that albinos are also discriminated against based on, their appearance? And he said yes. But then as an albino, you will know you are oppressed. Why would you also be gay? So that means you are not supposed to be given the light of day. You understand? And this has to do with class, because he kept mentioning the fact that in this situation, his dad was able to put him to school to become a lawyer and all of that, and now he's here and he has all the privilege, and he doesn't also acknowledge the privilege that he has though. So I think he feels like automatically all albinos should be able to access such, which is not true. So you see, in his quest to oppress gay people, he is also oppressing his fellow albinos who are minorities. You get me? So it goes on and on and on. So every oppression is linked. I remember Craig mentioning that if gay people, I'm not quoting Craig, I'm not quoting you, but I said, he said something like, if gay people, or let's put it this way, if they have their things together, then automatically women also have their things together, because there is that link. I think you mentioned something like that. So there is always a link when it comes to minority group. There is always a link, because we are constantly being overlooked and neglected, and then the system is built to just favor some people who look some way and feel some way and present as some way. So it doesn't matter whether it doesn't matter whether you are queer, it doesn't matter whether you're disabled, it doesn't matter whether you're a woman. Every other oppression is linked. So yes, it's just, and also it comes to the idea of intersectionality, right? One person having multiple identities. That is why we have the marginalized of the marginalized. So if you oppress one part of a person, then automatically you're oppressing the whole being, because you can't take away that thing away from the person. You can't take that identity away from the person. It is one in the same person. It just so happens that at a point in time, you see one identity or few identities manifest. That doesn't mean the other identities are not there. In another instance, other identities of that same person manifests itself out there. So yes, in Ghana, every oppression, not just in Ghana, even worldwide, the oppression of minority groups is linked. And I know this is the last question, and I probably, this will be the last time I'm gonna talk, and then we leave. I want to use this opportunity to mention that as a queer Ghanaian man and an activist, I have been trying so many times, or in so many ways, to help my community in vast different ways. And I'm always asking myself, how do I empower myself more to be able to help my community? And it keeps at every level that I find myself, I try to elevate myself to know better, to be able to help my community. So in this sense, currently, as I mentioned, in Ghana here, it's not safe for queer people, especially we, the activists that are out there with our identities in our faces. And I am trying to further my education, and fortunately, I've been able, thanks to one of your panelists here, Chris, I've been able to gain an admission in the UK, and I'm going to study law. Craig, I guess me and you, we are going to be in the same in the same line of work. I believe that I would be able to use this to help the community, because when it comes, the legal system also here kind of aids in the oppression of the Ghanaian. And every time we have legal issues, we do not have representation, or we don't have proper representation, because most of the lawyers do not want to touch us. They don't want to deal with that issue. So, and being a lawyer has been a long-time passion of mine. So now I have just a little problem with the fact that I wasn't able to get scholarship for my admission, so I'm kind of lacking there. So I'm just quickly going to put my PayPal in the comments, and anyone at all who is willing to support me in my education, kindly donate to me. I would be glad if you pay all of my tuition, but yeah. But then, yeah, in any way that you can, kindly donate to me. And if you know of any other programs that I can apply to, that I'll be able to get, I'll be able to get scholarship in the UK, I would gladly do that. I have checked myself, and most of them have ended, and all of that. But then, yes, I'm still going to put the PayPal in there. And the PayPal is, because I can open PayPal in Ghana here, my friend in the States, 𝐃𝐫𝐚𝐿 is the one who's having the PayPal, and he's hosting the funds for me. So if you see Abdulwase, don't be alarmed, it's still mine. Yes. So I'm just going to put it there. Thank you very much for your time. And thank you so much to Tom, to everybody for this platform. It's been so enlightening. I am so grateful to be here. And to Christopher, who I think is also one of your students, he schools there, and he came down to intern with us here in Ghana at LGBT Rights. I cannot believe that he had the courage to actually come and join us here in Ghana, knowing the way Ghana is. Come and join us here and help us in the fight against homophobia. Thank you so much, Chris. And thank you, Ida. Thank you to everybody who had me here. I'm so grateful. Thank you. And please don't forget to donate. Thank you so much.
All right, on this positive note, it's getting late. We would like to wrap up our discussion, and I personally would like to thank all of our panelists and participants in the discussion for your amazing contributions, and that was definitely an event that was worth it. I hope you enjoyed it too, and thank you so much for sharing lots of insights with us. And maybe Tom wants to say a couple of things, and then we can end the discussion round.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for giving me the word again. Yeah, I can only say thank you so much for all the panelists to take the time to be here tonight, and to have been there earlier for a meeting with us to talk about the questions and to just talk about the event. It really means a lot to us, especially that we were able to have a very diverse and international perspective on things. And yeah, it was really nice. Thank you so much for being here tonight.